Oh, wow.
Oh, I thought no, I think you know
Wow, that's awesome.
We'll see now. It's like to plan and have things all ready. He's a tea shop called Tastemint. Yeah, he's a little mess. It's like a black lab and everything? Okay. Oh, golden beetle. Yeah, those are possible. They do have a lot of that.
I'm asking, I thought you told me that because
Does the dog have any hip problems or knee problems? Yeah. Oh. They're known for having hip and knee problems.
This is my dad. I don't even know. I'm sure that you He was here for marriage.
Do you play golf?
When I'm doing that, we're doing those balls. What's rolling down my
I like both too. My dad loves golf.
Excuse me, car market certified this. We're gonna start having some words for Dominic,
Go down.
I broke it, yeah.
It seems like there's no circulation at all. Yeah. It's getting hotter and hotter.
First of all, if I could remind everyone, if you have not already, please silence your cell phone. I'm Ken Lawrence. I'm honored. I've been a sort of an honorary member of the Sabatino family for almost 60 years now. Robert Frost said, "Good fences make good neighbors." So we had a great fence between our house and the Sabatino house. I lived back to back with Don. So I've been honored to ask and introduce the speakers for today for Dominic, who was like a second father to me growing up. First, we're going to hear from Bob Howard, who is a very close friend of Dominic's, and then we're going to hear from Sherry, Dominic's oldest daughter, and then lastly, we'll hear from Don, Dominic's youngest son. So, Bob.
Hi, I'm Bob Howard, one of Don's buddies. When Don and I first met, approximately 30 years ago, he was at a realtor's luncheon at Woodmere Village at the tennis club. I was new in the title business. He knew I was a new face at the luncheon, and he introduced himself to me and said, "You're going to sit at my table." He introduced me to all the realtors at the luncheon, which are competitors. We were competitors from different companies. Bought me a glass of wine at lunch, and we became friends. He later told me, of course, at the luncheon, that he was the past president of the Cleveland Area Board of Realtors in 1979. He used to love to brag about it. It was a big thing for Dominic, a big achievement. He was a realtor for over 60 years, and I thought to myself, why would he introduce me to all these other realtors that he'd been doing business with? That's the kind of guy Dominic was. 30 years ago, he was like a grandfather image to me. As I got older, he became more of a big brother, and later, close friend. He would always say, "Let's do lunch at the Big D." The Big D was Sabatino's restaurant in Menor, which is no longer there. But we did a lot of lunches at the Big D in Menor. DQS had several quotes. I'm sure the family knows them all. One of them was, "Don't deprive yourself of anything you can afford today," which was very true. And he used to say, you know, we can agree to disagree. And we disagreed a lot. Everything shall come to pass, good, bad, and indifferent, and many others. Not long ago, he said, wait, if the Republicans win the House, Trump will be made Speaker of the House, and then he'll become president. We disagreed. Don and I loved Sabatino's in Mentor, and we ate over a 15-year period, probably hundreds of times. He called it the Big D, and if we made a bet, Don would say, "I'll bet you lunch at the Big D." Needless to say, I lost my share of lunches till I didn't bet anymore. On the humorous side, Dominic loved his Cadillacs. He had many, many over the years. And on several occasions, I drove him to the seller's home to pick up the new car. And he used to say to me, "Bob, wait until you see this Cadillac." He loved them all. When we were both in the title business, we used to meet for a 15-minute break once a week at Dairy Queen on Chagrin Boulevard, sometimes twice a week. He liked his ice cream. When we got there, Dom's car license plate DQS1 were waiting for me. He was always early when it was ice cream break. I was asked, what is I asked him, what did the Q in DQS stand for? And he said, Dairy Queen Sabatino. He loved his ice cream. The last year, DQS problems were mainly his eyesight. He fought and overcame several cancers and beat them all. His memory was sharp, sometimes better than mine. Ask my daughter. He never complained to me except when he would say, "Bob, don't get old." I want to read you, to end this, I want to read a poem that I think Dominic would have liked to have shared too with all of us. It's called The Dash by Linda Ellis. I read of a man who stood to speak at the funeral of a friend. He referred to the dates on the tombstone from the beginning to the end. He notes that first came the date of birth and spoke of the following date with tears. But he said what mattered most was the dash between those years. For the dash represents all the time that he spent alive on earth, and now only those who loved him knows what it means. That little line is worth, for it matters not how much we own, the cars, the house, the cash. What matters is how we live and love, and how we spend our dash. So think about it long and hard. Are those the things you'd like to change? For you never know how much time is left that still can be rearranged. If we could just slow down enough to consider what is true and real, and always try to understand the way other people feel, and be less quick to anger and show appreciation more, and love the people in our lives like we've never loved before. If we treat each other with respect and more often wear a smile, remembering this special dash might only last a while. So when your eulogy is being read, with your life's actions to rehash, would you be proud of the things they say about how you spent your dash? Thank you.
Dominic, Mr. Sabatino, DQS, Dad, Papa. We each had our own way of addressing him. Husband, father, brother, grandfather, great-grandfather, co-worker, friend, neighbor. These were the many nouns that described who this man was. To me, he was Papa. Mom and Papa were married in 1955. I have been in the Sabatino family for 68, almost 69 years. I am standing in this room with aunts and uncles and cousins who, by the nature of their tender hearts and the guiding of my Papa's gentle inclusiveness, welcomed me into the family as their own. Papa always introduced me as his daughter. I was never Mary's daughter or even stepdaughter. I was his or their daughter. In saying this, Papa always also allowed me to feel that he was never trying to take the place of my dad, as Dad was a very present part of my life. As a little girl, an adolescent, and an adult, this gave me a sense of belonging which became more and more important to me as I grew older. When Chris and Lauren got married, June 4th, 2005, that was Papa and Mom's 50th anniversary. I took an opportunity at the wedding to kneel down at their table between Mom and Papa, and I told them just what I've said to you. I'm happy that I was able to do that, and it ended with all three of us crying. I want to thank everyone who has acknowledged Papa with written and verbal condolences from near and far. The support of family and friends here and in Massachusetts, who literally dropped everything to make my transition back to Cleveland as smooth as possible. And last but not least, I want to thank my brothers. Paul, for your time spent with Papa and Mom, talking about this or that, digging deep into the Sabatino family history and sharing it with us all, and always being on call to build, repair, or replace anything that was needed inside or outside the house. Don, for giving your advice on specific matters that Papa felt comfortable asking of you, for making their trips to California and his to Kentucky enjoyable and were ones that they always looked forward to. Moving back east, where we all felt a sense of we're at least in the neighborhood to make a drive-in. Scott. Scott, for spending 24 hours per day, 7 days a week with Mom and Papa, and after Mom was gone, being there to watch over Papa. I know that often at night I would think of you both, and I could rest well knowing you were there if he needed help. I am forever grateful. You were best friends and caretakers of each other. Daughters and dads speak to each other in a different way and with a different tone than with sons. We had some tender conversations about you three. Papa praised you boys constantly to me. He would never forget to throw in thankfulness to me, but always spoke with gratitude for for you all. I don't know what I'd do without, and he would go on. I will miss Papa's bi-weekly emails, sending love to Rick and my kids, and reminding me that Anita is an angel, Lauren is a doll, and Katie never forgets. Until we meet again, I love you, Papa, your daughter, Sherry.
First of all, on behalf of my family, our sincerest thanks to everyone who's here today to celebrate my dad's life. I especially want to thank a few people. My dad's sister and brother, Aunt Anita, of 12 Fields. We met a lot. thanks for being there. Uncle Paul, for being his best friend every day. Thanks. My siblings. Sherry, you knocked it out of the park on that one. It's a tough one to follow. Paul, Scott, talk about you two a little bit. My wife Chris, my son Anthony, for helping me keep it together. All of Dad's grandkids and great-grandkids. Our relatives and our friends. Bob, you're like family. That eulogy was amazing. You're a terrific friend of my dad. He loved you like a brother. Kenny Lawrence, you are family. Thank you for everything. Thank you for always being there. Vince, I don't know if you're in the back. Thanks for arranging everything. Really appreciate that. And to my father-in-law, Charlie, he just lost his brother on Friday. Was gonna go and visit him and knew he had to come here. And he missed the visit because he was told not to go. And I told him, you can't put things off, you have to go. And he made the drive today, and he's here with us now. You may not realize it, but when you live to be 95, you've pretty much outlived all of your friends and colleagues. My dad touched so many people throughout his life, and the text, emails, calls, and hugs I've received from everyone on how sad they are and how Dad will be missed and what a great man he was has been deeply touching and so truly amazing. Many of you know me as Don or Donnie. When I was born, my parents named me after my dad, Dominic Sabatino Jr. I'd always ask what my middle name was, and my mom said, your dad doesn't have a middle name, so neither do you. I asked that question because when I was growing up, there just weren't that many Dominics running around, and I wasn't too fond of that name. It seemed unusual at the time. I figured perhaps I'd go by my middle name, but I didn't have one. My mom, so she would say, called me Don or Donnie as a nickname to differentiate me from my dad, so when she called for us, we both wouldn't answer or come running at the same time. What I did know was it was serious business when either one of them called me Dominic. As I grew older, I would show people my driver's license, and they'd say, Dominic, that's a really cool name. I wasn't quite convinced, but from time to time, I'd start to introduce myself as Dominic, still not realizing the true significance of being named after my dad. I, like many of you, swore growing up I'd never be like my parents, and certainly not like my dad. Well, I'm here to tell you how totally wrong I was, because in so many ways, I've become just like my dad, and I'm proud as hell. Of being named after him. Proudly, my name is Dominic Sabatino Jr. And I'm a grateful believer in Jesus Christ. And I will share more about my faith and the impact it had on my relationship with my dad in a bit. When I eulogized my mom, I mentioned that I've probably given hundreds of speeches and presentations over the year, but nothing really prepares you for eulogizing your parents. What helped me then and prepared me tonight is knowing that Jesus also grieved. He wept, and his heart ached as mine does now. Tonight, I have the honor to represent my siblings in eulogizing my dad, or Papa. He was Poppy, or Pops to me. Sherry's the eldest, and technically my half-sister. I never quite knew or realized that until much later, because it just wasn't a topic of conversation in our house. Sherry is and always has been my older sister and Dad's eldest daughter. Mom would say she was the rebel of the bunch during her younger years, but that stage helped mold Sherry into the truly wonderful woman she is today. What I recall most about growing up with Sherry and Dad is she was what I would say or call Miss Opposite. Dad would say up, she'd say down. He'd say right, she'd say left. You get the picture? But oh, how close they grew over the years. And with the conversations I've had with Dad, Sherry, I know her papa had a very special place in his heart for Sherry. Paul was Dad's firstborn son and my eldest brother. I always wondered why he wasn't named Dominic, but as tradition would have it, the firstborn son was to be named after our grandfather, who came to this country from Italy. It's no surprise that he's become our family's Italian, Sicilian traditionalist. He made sure I know that. Dad would say, your mom and I always can depend on Paul no matter where he was or what he was doing. He could ask Paul for help with anything, and he'd be there without hesitation. Never complained, always with a smile on his face and a pep in his step. I always admired that about my brother. Since Mom passed, Paul would bring Dad lunch, take him to his VA and doctor's appointments, or just sit with him and listen to stories, even if he heard them for the 100th time. Paul would always keep me apprised on how Dad was doing, feeling, his mood or disposition. He had a special way, an elderly brotherly way, of telling me how Dad was aging, changing, things that were impacting him, and what to expect or how to act living away from him when visiting. I appreciated that advice. Scott is my middle brother and the closest to me in age. I turned 60 last month. Mom and Dad somehow knew that once I was born, their baby, Scott, was now sandwiched between Paul and I, and they didn't want him to feel any different. Parents, of course, love all their children equally, no matter what the pecking order. Scott, or Scotty as Dad called him, is the quiet one who has an inquisitive mind with an entrepreneurial drive and spirit. After Mom passed, Scott immediately became Dad's companion. Living at Dad's house, Scott could be there for him, keeping watch, and they were great for each other. Dad could fuss over him, and Scott helped him fill the lonely void that Dad had with Mom's passing. I enjoyed seeing them support each other. They had a routine and a special bond. Scott living with Dad was a godsend, and his being at Dad's house provided tremendous comfort knowing he was looking after him. We could all sleep a little easier. I'm grateful he was with Poppy when he passed. By now, you know I'm the youngest of our family, and I learned quickly which parent to play if I wanted something. Truth be told, it wasn't my dad. It's not that I couldn't work him, he just took more time and effort, and the wins were far and few between. I read this definition of dad somewhere. A dad is someone who is there for his children, provides direction and guidance, watches and actively participates in their lives. A dad helps them grow up, teaches, raises, and nurtures them. Is present. My dad was that and more, much more. He taught me how to ride a bike, how to drive, how to shave, how to watch and play golf, and respect the etiquette of the game. He showed me how to tie my first tie, to look sharp, to be on time and don't procrastinate. We collected coins together. He was my friend. He was my best friend. He was my coach and biggest fan. I could always look up in the stand and bleachers during my games and matches, and there he was, cheering me on. He was never overbearing. He was my sounding board, always had the right guidance or advice. He knew just what to say and how to say it. He was my counselor. He was my confidant. He was my mentor. I was his protege. When I thought I knew it all, or had it all figured out, he gave me that proper dose of reality. He kept me in check, grounded, properly tempered me. Always said to bring a jacket when I left the house, even in the summertime. He'd wait up on the couch when I'd go out at night and never went to bed until I got home. He always left the porch front light on for me. He turned it off when he knew I was home safe and sound. He always asked me for my flight itinerary when I traveled so he could track my flights from takeoff to landing, sending me updates when I was delayed, welcoming me immediately upon arrival no matter the hour. He did this from my very first flight until my last one a few weeks ago, the last one being a red-eye where he joyfully greeted me landing at 5:20 a.m. Dad taught me to be the man that I am today. He was all of these things, but most of all, Dad was my hero. After running a 4.440 for the Pittsburgh Steelers at Pro Day my senior year and qualifying for the 1988 Olympic bobsled team, after my strength coach at UK encouraged me to try out in 1985 because they were seeking strong and fast college athletes to push the sled and compete against the Russians and East Germans. This was before Herschel Walker joined in 1992. I made the conscious decision to hang up my cleats, tuck away my training invite to Lake Placid so I could accept an offer upon graduation with a specialized advertising agency. My goal now was to challenge myself professionally, to strive to be like Dad, successful in business, to be just like him. I'm often asked if I have regrets. Not going for it. Not at all. 38 years later, I can say, Dad, mission accomplished. Please bear with me a little bit more while I share a few highlights about the kindest, nicest, friendliest, warmest, caring, and selfless man I know. My dad was born on June 30th, 1927, 2 years before the Great Depression of 1929. That spanned 10 years. Growing up during the Great Depression impacted him in many ways. He was the oldest of 6 children and held many jobs prior to turning 16 to help support his parents. Many of us have entertaining and animated videos of him describing these jobs. He went to East Tech when most of his siblings, I believe, went to John Adams. He also attended the University of Miami in Coral Gables, Florida. He enlisted in the Army and served over in Germany during World War II as a supply sergeant. For you MASH fans, he was our Radar O'Reilly. His trip across the Atlantic was on a commercial ship, a real tin can. And as you can imagine, it wasn't a pleasant ride. It ruined Dad from ever considering a fishing trip or going on a family cruise. It was always out of the question. He had some pretty amazing stories from his time in the Army and being over in Europe, and always shared his experience with tremendous energy and detail. He loved his country and all that it stood for. Upon arrival back in the States, he reacclimated himself and went to work at the American Automobile Association, or AAA, where he met the love of his life. Dominic and Mary Jane married June 4th, 1955. Sherry was 5, and they had their first child together in 1956. Mom and Dad were one of the first to buy a home on Blanchester Road in Lyndhurst, Ohio. It was a neighborhood of young couples starting their families, and lifelong bonds were created. For various reasons, we moved to a home right across the street, and Mom and Dad remained in that house until this day. Dad, or DQS, his monogram license plate he created, and as he was known, was an icon on Blanchester, and Blanchester became his street. Dad ultimately found his calling in real estate and worked for a well-known company called Hilltop Realty. He was a loyal and dedicated employee who helped make Hilltop the best real estate company in Cleveland. He was the top realtor for many years and was the Cleveland Area Board of Realtors, CBOR, First Associate of the Year in 1961. He became a trustee of the board in 65 and again in 72 and 73. He was first elected vice president of CBOR in 77, and in 78, he was president-elect. He was the first associate in the history of the board to become president. He was nominated and elected to both the State and National Association of Realtors. When a well-known writer for an industry publication said, "What makes him tick? Does he have some idol to emulate, a famous person, quote, or tenant to live by?" When asked to defend himself against the charges, Dad replied, "I recognize the good in other people. I try to take an objective view on everything and determine the best way to do things. I come from a family background of respect for others and a good Christian attitude. I realize that all are human beings." Dad worked well into his 80s, always maintaining his license and venturing into the title business. He loved the industry, and the industry could not let go of him. It was also something to augment playing golf, and it kept him out of Mom's hair when she needed alone time. Dad wasn't the best flyer, and Mom would say he needed a relaxing agent prior to flights, even if it was early in the morning. Probably the only time he approached a bar or had a hard drink. Their last flight together was to Hawaii. They invited me to join them, but I chose to stay home because I didn't want to miss playing in a football game. How I wish I went. They drove everywhere and would drive to Florida or take Amtrak to visit me in California. They also took a bus from LA to Vegas, and that's how they would get back, and they loved going to Vegas. One year, Mom wasn't feeling well, and Dad still wanted to come visit me, and he actually flew to California. To this day, I don't know how he mustered up the courage to fly, but his desire to see me was greater than his fear of flying. A few additional things to share about Dad, what I'll relish or I'll miss most. Our yearly family vacations to Florida. Watching him cut the lawn in his Bermuda shorts, black socks just below his knees, and his black wingtip dress business shoes. It was a classic. Sitting in his chair, dressed as described, smoking a cigar after finishing the lawn. He was so proud of his yard work. Watching him throw a football underhand. He could throw it that way a country mile. My excitement grabbing 2 baseball gloves for a good catch. Right after dinner, I never could get past Field of Dreams. His endearing love towards my mom, even when she was cranky. Taking me with him to the office, introducing me to all of his coworkers. Being at the Stouffer Hotel ballroom as he was sworn in as president of Cabor. All-day trips to Cedar Point, a round of golf together. He loved to play and watch. His stories, our chats, his notes and cards, telling me to never quit work in front of family. His smile, asking how Chris and Anthony and I are doing first when I called him to ask him how he was doing. His sauce simmering on the stove at 10 a.m., teaching Anthony how to make meatballs. His love, commitment, and dedication to family. His giddiness for his grandkids and his great-grandkids. Being emphatic about family tradition, embracing his role as patriarch. His love for his brothers and sisters, his mom and dad. Being a cancer survivor, prostate and throat, a World War II veteran, entertaining people, pushing food at you even when you were full, bringing me to visit my grandma even when I was tired or reluctant, car rides alone, walks at the mall together, trips to Ferrar's and tasty pizza, his love for older Cadillacs, driving me at 5 a.m. in snowstorms to deliver the Sun Messenger newspaper, driving my cousin Chuck and I all the way to Brecksville by 7 a.m. for our summer job at the Regional Income Tax Agency. His reaction at the dinner table while eating spaghetti when I got my ear pierced at Spencer Gifts. Suggesting to him it wasn't permanent like my brother's tattoos. As you can imagine, that didn't go over very well. Dad sitting with my wife Chris by themselves in the living room and is telling her so many stories for hours. She was so patient. His guidance and wisdom, his being in the stands or bleachers, his being there, our hugs, him crying when we were separating from visiting each other, his voice, his voicemails, saying I love you and hearing him say it back. By now you have a better view into my dad, Papa or Poppy, what kind of man he really was. I said earlier that the Great Depression impacted him. His mantra, hard work and dedication were critical to him. Commitment, loyalty, devotion, generosity, values, caution, friendships, good meals, compassion, love for all, family, and traditions were imperative. Allow me to share one final story. Dad had a zest for life. He set a goal in his mind to live to be 100 years old. He'd say age is just a number, and when asked, what do you want for your birthday? What would he say? Another birthday. Dad set this goal when he was younger and never anticipated diminishing hearing, eyesight, and energy level, nor losing his bride, the love of his life. When Mom passed away, things changed. Dad was sad. He was very sad. You can often hear him sigh out loud. After some time passed, he appeared to regain that momentum of wanting to reach 100 again. But you could tell while he still had that zest for life, it wasn't quite the same. I'd encourage everyone to embrace the elderly, sit, be patient, and listen. You'll gain some valuable insights and wisdom about life. Dad's perspective was invaluable. For as long as I can remember, Dad was in awe of how planes could fly and ships could float. He marveled at the wonders of life. He struggled to wrap his brain around what he couldn't see and would often ask me about my faith. You really believe there's something after this life, don't you? I would answer him emphatically, yes. It's right there in front of your eyes, Pop. Planes can fly, ships can float. The beauty and wonders that amaze you didn't just happen by mistake. God's behind it, and imagine what he has waiting for all of us, Pop. I know Mom is experiencing it, and you will too. When you read Scripture, focus on John 3:16. You can wrap your brain around it because you've been seeing it each and every day right in front of your eyes. I truly believe he did this, and in the end, his broken heart for my mom might have been too much against his desire to live to be 100. I'm confident he's in heaven and greeted Mom with the biggest hug and bouquet of roses on Valentine's Day. What worried my dad the most was us kids not getting along, taking care of each other, and carrying on the tradition and legacies of our parents, our grandparents, and our ancestors. I assured my dad this would not happen. It comes down to the old adage, are you interested versus committed? Are you interested in being your very best, or are you committed to being the very best? So I'll close by asking each of you, Eric, Kelly, Katie, Lauren, Vince, Mark, Bethany, Marcy, Patrick, and Anthony, Bridget, Aaron, my cousins, I know Ange was here, Paul, Carmen, Butchie, Gina, and Bobby, Ann, Pauline, Paul, and Chuck. Are you interested in keeping the flames of your family's storied history and tradition burning bright, or will you be committed? Dad often mentioned how blessed he was, and there's no doubt he was. We would all be blessed to live a life like he did. He lived and died on his terms. I'd say we were truly blessed to know and or have him in our lives as long as we did. Poppy, you truly lived a wonderful life and left us with terrific memories. We are so grateful to have you as our papa, our poppy, our dad. Have a blast with Mom. I know I'm going to see you both in heaven. I love you.
Very good words. This concludes our services and visitation for Dominic. Tomorrow morning, we're meeting at church. The immediate family will come here, along with the pallbearers, be here by 9:15. And the rest of us will meet at church, and then we'll line up for those who are going to the cemetery. If you'd like, go back to the chapel, step up, pay your last respects.
Thank you. Okay, let's go.